Okay, we are live here for at least the next couple of hours, 8/20, 2024. The DNC peaceful protests should be starting any moment there. And, as far as I'm concerned, these protests are steam valves, acceptable expressions of political violence surrounded by big brother's enforcers. It's like mental patients attacking orderlies. It's a joke. Let's see here. Today, we're going to talk about a number of things to add on to what we talked about before. And I spent the day going through Twitter. I was fighting a lot of the Mandela affected. Just another hornet's nest to kick. We went after the chemtrailers are mad, chasing us down. Synchro mystics are a little mad. The the Mandela affected people have never liked me because of my viewpoints. They've called me the God blocker. They believe, or some who believe, that the Mandela effect is a path to salvation, see me as kind of their devil in some weird way. But after talking to a lot of people on Twitter about it, looking back and forth and seeing how easily this spreads, it's like there's another Mandela effect outbreak. And I've heard something called the misinformation effect, which sounds like mainstream stuff. However, it's based on sound observation and studies, which suggests that every time you recall something, you slightly alter it. And the way that the Mandela effect works is something called the retroactive interference of the interrogator. The interrogator's bias even plays a role here. But if you were to ask somebody, Jif or Jiffy peanut butter, you're actually loading the question. Do you remember Jif or Jiffy? You've loaded the question with something that doesn't exist. And whether they want to or not, now their subconscious mind has produced that alternate version. And the alternate version and the real version are simultaneously being evaluated in that moment where they're being asked. And there's some other dynamics at play here, which we'll talk about extensively in the documentary, about the cult, the group, the acceptance, and why people join groups. But the mechanism of the Mandela effect is well understood. The person asking the question is quite literally creating a false memory. And it's systematic. It's just a easy thing to do. Every time you ask someone, you're actually gaslighting them. Do you remember the sky being blue or pink? If you get the person to doubt what they know, even for a second, you've effectively gaslit them. You've caused a little bit of cognitive dissonance, and the only way to reconcile that is to find the more satisfying answer. And oftentimes, that little bit of confusion that you inflict by asking the question might cause them to lean towards, I'm pretty sure I remember Timmy in the well. And they attach to that feeling what they imagined. And that's what replaces, through the misinformation effect and repetition, the actual memory. So it's likely that the deeply Mandela affected believe their own misrememberings, that they may actually recall cornucopia on their underwear. They might recall Ed McMahon with the big check driving around their neighborhood. These repeated proclamations, I remember, every time they say it, they're reinforcing it. It's a form of gaslighting, and of course, we're talking about the intentional creation of false memories. That's what explains it. So, retroactive interference, not retroactive changing of things. And I went into this today because I realized that simulation theory isn't merely a guardrail. Well, I mean, that's part of it. It's not the only one, though. The simulation theory is an attack on cognition. It's an active measure as well as a guardrail, meaning it's meant to confuse you. The proponents of simulation theory are the likes of Elon Musk. Why would they push this? They push this because they don't want you to notice that the news presents a simulation, that our history is prefabricated through simulated events. And they don't want you to distinguish between the simulation they create and the real world. They want you to conflate the two. So if you notice anything weird about what you're getting through the media, or you're feeling Mandela effects, or you're seeing these bizarre coincidences, they want your default go-to answer to be, it's a simulation. And the Mandela effect is very popular among people who know that the news is fake. Well, now they think the news is fake. Yeah, that's good, but now they say reality's fake, which kind of cancels out their initial observation. Because what standing do you have to call the news fake if you're saying nothing is real? You've just discredited your entire perspective. And I think that's by design. And for the most part, the people who believe in Mandela effects still believe the news. The Mandela effect isn't something that skeptics arrive at. It's more of a new agey, uh, kind of a I call it a new agey proposition. But again, simulation theory, Mandela effect, synchromysticism, these are all distractions from Trutherville designed to prevent you from seeing the media for what it is, a simulation. And again, just because the news is fake doesn't mean reality's fake. We have to kind of walk it back a little bit. Like discovering how fake the news is has turned some people into solipsists. They've left reality, they've ascended, they've transcended the plane. It's like, no, you haven't. Some Fed tricked you into not pulling back the green screen. All right, we are joined by 737 Matt X. Let's go. Baja Pickleball. Mango Penguins. Ted Stryker. Nice Mandela vid. Short and effective. Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to be doing a lot of short videos. 1 minute. I'll probably go for the 1 minute, the shorts, to grow the channel. All right, let's go. Elephant Tusks. Ollie Goering. Yeah, 3 up, 3 down. I will send you a link. In fact, you can find this song on my Patreon, but I'll try to work on that. Trying to work on a few things simultaneously. I got distracted from the 24/7. I had to go down to the FBI field office today. Joe Mature 101, thanks for joining. Lando Rock, thank you for joining. Okay, Queen Diamond B. All right, we have crossed 63 pretty quick. Okay, we're past 50. That's what I was waiting for. We used to start at 33, but now we start much earlier. Deprogram Truther says feels like home here. Adaptivia has joined us from Twitch, joined by Thirst for Truth. Ryler says, I'm Mandoozled. No shame. A lot of us have been Mandoozled at one point. And I mean, in many ways, you could look at the mainstream media as a form of actively Mandoozling people. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Jennifer Reeves has joined. Thank you for rolling in. So, the Mandela effect, if it is in fact, as I say, retroactive interference and the misinformation effect, then what is mainstream news but the constant repetition of lies until they become true? The constant repetition of fake versions that conflict with what you may have perceived, or oftentimes they do movie versions of events and saturate the collective psyche with that. So people do, in fact, have this movie enhanced worldview. That's what I call it. And that's the simulation. Like, if you think about it, it's like living in a cult. And you have some cult leader lying to you 24/7 about a lot of things. Although the general consensus about reality is not contested. They're not saying that reality doesn't exist, but they're saying these are alternative considerations. This is our lens. And we're talking about the lens through which the public, the consensus, views the world. And there is a consensus. That's why I say that there's a programmed class. There's no opt out. Everybody's on the same sheet. And the few people have dared violate the boundaries get called out. Flat earthers. I don't think this is how it is. Look what happened to them. They got silenced and censored. Auto hoaxers have been vicariously attacked through straw men, fake people. Like, well, we don't even need to name them. There's a whole litany of people we could. I mean, it's like an army of misinformation agents who are there to take the hits, pretend to be the counter media, pretend to be against the lies. They call themselves truthers, so it's easy to fall into that trap. But truthers are liars. That's axiomatic. We can just go ahead and state that. And it may not be intentional. It may be that they're using the tools of liars. They may not know because they have adopted the behaviors of the mainstream, which is intrinsically built on lying. And lying is more than just confabulating or speaking an untruth and passing it off as real, but it includes sleight of mind. Even lies by omission constitute a huge part of this. And the main lie that keeps people in the false paradigm is that you can look at the screen as a window to the world when it has always been a filter. And one more point, good liars don't lie all the time. They tell the truth. They become reliable so that when they do lie, it hits. And they also have the credibility of the people who trust them. And I don't trust media. Eddie F says, how can people still believe these conventions? It's like low budget movies. Yeah, I'm not impressed. Armin Reese says, "What's the date for the Zoom conference and how much is the ticket?" The AH92824 World Stage Killer Asteroid Impacts Saturday. Again, that's September the 28th, and it's a $5 Zoom ticket. And you can still, I'm thinking here, it should be easy to have the Zoom conference streaming on YouTube. But if you want to be in the Zoom chat, and if you want to participate in the Q&A, that's all going to be done through Zoom for that reason. Plenty of time. Elephant Tusk says, "Don't you think it'll be a simulation? Wait, don't you think you will be convinced it's a simulation until you're out of the simulation, or at least see through it?" Well, here's my issue with simulation theory. Your only evidence for it is Elon Musk said, or something you saw on TV, some internet meme like the Mandela effect. Like, what tangible evidence do you have? And for the most part, simulation theory is just transcendentalism rebranded. It's not even novel. But I'm saying that the concept of simulation theory has been weaponized against truthers so they can't differentiate between fake news and fake reality. They just think, oh, if news is fake, reality is fake because the news is a window to the world. No, it's the liar. So this person is lying. The TV is lying, and it's giving you a distortion. So you can debunk the lies, and you're not debunking reality. Okay, Elephant Tusk says, "I speak from experience." Okay, I can't take anecdotal. Like, I have experiences that have me convinced that death is a hoax, that people's sentience remains around if you're willing to listen. But I would never try to pass that off as a truth. I'm like, it's too subjective. And not only that, I'm not going to shift the burden of proof, which should be mine, for something that I can't provide evidence for. It's just too much. But it's also not relevant to this conversation. One thing I want to do is I want to keep media analysis objective and stop allowing mysticism to be inserted into it. We swept that out. We fumigated this place. We had all these mystic explanations for news coincidences. Oh, look, this movie mirrored what happened in the future. Magic, minds blown. Like, no, your mind shouldn't be blown. You should see this is how it works. It's the deliberate synchronization between one form of propaganda and another. One form is passive, one's a little more active, one is not openly propaganda, and the other one pretends to be offering you a view of the world when it's, in fact, again, filtered. Eddie F says, "Breakdown quantum of consciousness recent video on the Mandela effect." Yeah, I concede. The Mandela effect is real. So is the misinformation effect. So are false memories. So is faulty eyewitness testimony. And the mechanism is there. Like, here's the thing. If someone said to you, "Has anything strange occurred to you about Pikachu?" Like, it's highly unlikely you would say anything. Nothing would pop off the top of your head. But if you instead load the question, "Hey, look, Pikachu used to have a black tail, now he has a yellow tail." Well, when the person asks that loaded question, now you have these competing versions in your mind. One of them was prompted. This is what creates faulty eyewitnesses. It's the interrogator's bias, retroactive interference, and it is a thing, again. And the more they do it, the more they double down, triple, the more they actually entrench and create these new memories. So I'm saying that the Mandela affected are in fact self-deceived, and they've been drinking their own Kool-Aid for so long that they can't really disabuse themselves of the lies they've accepted. It's another example of mind war casualties. You know, you might feel bad for people who cry when they see a fake shooting on TV. Yeah, it's sad. The TV kind of gave them some mental malware, and now they're emotional and triggerable. Mind war casualties. Well, I consider the Mandela affected similarly to be mind war casualties if they have accepted the entire premise, which is, again, faulty. And it's based on a deliberate, or maybe not so deliberate, but a misunderstanding of how recollection works and the effect of the framing of the question. You know, when it comes to the news media, it often frames stories in such a way that leads you falsely to assume something, or that you have to choose between these two options. There's no suspension of disbelief. I mean, think about this. Why aren't there third options? You've got Mandela effect, option A, option B. It's always an either or proposition. It's always a binary. Why isn't it more like option A, B, C, D, E up to infinity? If reality was shifting, it would be crazy. You wouldn't be able to trademark logos because they wouldn't be the same tomorrow. But I was on Twitter, and I say battling the Mandela effect, and I'm just like asking them, why would you lie over something so trivial? And they get so pearl clutchy about it, like, how dare you call me a liar? And it's like, no, you're quite literally lying right now. You don't remember Timmy in the well. Now, is this person a malicious liar, a witting liar? No, this is a form of self-deception. And people who can't admit they're wrong, or people, that's, look at I guess the group of it itself kind of tells you something about how, in group dynamics, a lot of people believing something creates a view that it's real, it's true. And it creates this pretty strong in-group dynamic where they kind of become defensive over their beliefs. It's very much like a religion. I've called it a miracle effect. But I got some interesting feedback from people on X about this. So, for example, this individual is sharing a picture of his Fruit of the Loom, and it had a cornucopia on it. And a number of people were like, we're in a simulation. And this guy said, can I use this picture? I need to prove to some people that they used to have a cornucopia. And I said, Mandela effect shills are liars or confused. And he, Jesus Christ, said, are you saying I'm a shill? And I said, you're either a shill or you're confused. The third possibility, lying for attention. And here's the key point. Reality doesn't change retroactively. Now, the person was sharing images that proved the Mandela effect, which they call residue, evidence. And I'm saying, no, this is tainting witnesses. This is like tainting the jury pool, throwing out fake evidence. And people make so much fake evidence. So I searched this guy's socks. He supposedly pulled them out of an old sock drawer. Turns out it's a 10-year-old picture from a April Fool's Day joke. So this April Fool's Day joke, fake picture of fake Mandela effect evidence, has been circulating for years. Now, people can legitimately say, I remember it used to have a cornucopia. Yeah, you remember because you saw the popular misconception, or you heard a popular misconception. That's kind of how this thing works. But the key point for me here is the mechanism for creating it is well understood, and it has zero to do with reality shifting or simulation theory. But if you accept the premise that it's shifting, then you're like, yeah, CERN, reality shifts, different timelines, time travel. It opens the doors to this science fiction paradigm that's fake. Okay, Armin Reese says I'll be working on the 28th. Okay, good. Yeah, it's going to be about a 7-hour long event. Slick Rick says Key Scott Bridge really collapsed. Yeah, it was hit by the Dali. Like Salvador Dali. Elephant Tusk says I'm from the Jim Osmond reality. Well, anyway, we've done that to death. Nobody cares about the Mandela effect. I just see it breaking out and people are happy to jump onto it. And I'm like, do people just... I don't know. I guess we're looking at this sea of irrelevance where you can believe whatever you want, and there's no consequences to being wrong. You're entitled to your own facts these days, which is strange. Like, I'm cool with people having their own opinions, but if we have to agree to let them have their own facts, then this is a madhouse. And I think this is by design, though. This is how they make people malleable. Okay, let's see here. This is repeat. I feel like we're living through 2016 all over again. Here's Hillary Clinton. Everything's kind of reversed though. Here she is chanting, "Lock him up." This is again 2016 all over again.
His own trial, and when he woke up, he made his own kind of history. The first person to run for president with 34 felony convictions.
And hey, on that note, it's only 34 felony convictions because 33 would have been too obvious. They hate us calling out the hoax code. So if you hear 34, you see a 34 and it's very conspicuous, you can just consider it to be a stalking horse for the 33, which is just right behind it.
as Vice President Kamala sat in the Situation Room.
They're chanting, lock him up. Elephant says Hillary Clinton is part of the Mothers of Darkness group. That sounds like Q lore. And unfortunately, there's a lot of Q-Late still circulating. People are still recycling Q drops. Q said this would happen. One person, and I didn't bookmark it because it's annoying, there's this MAGA-ette. And luckily she wasn't rapping. Like MAGA rap isn't as big this cycle around. But she said, oh, you notice the Trump hat has a 45-47. And that's because it means he's President 45, 46, and will be 47. Which is saying that he was president this entire time. And I hear this and I'm like, wait, so does he get credit for all the bad stuff you're complaining about? And the true, the true QAnoners, the deep in the Q-Aid ones will say, well, yeah, he had to show us how bad it would be if he didn't win. I mean, it's hard to keep up with their cognitive dissidence. Joined by Galaxy, thanks for joining. Leo Pirate says, I think people are just hungry for supernatural experiences. Yeah, they are. I call it the miracle effect in the ebook I wrote debunking it, which will be the basis for the documentary. Pete Trippa says, good evening, auto hoaxers. 3 Up, 3 Down says, Mandela is cringe. It is really cringe. And what's really cringy is that I've done them a service of debunking it, and none of them will say, thank you. I have deprogrammed from this particularly malicious piece of mental malware. No, they don't do that. Instead, they call me the God Blocker, and they double down. But I have no sympathy for belief systems. I think now is a good time to just decide this is the age of information, and if something's knowable, we should know it. We shouldn't rely on secondhand interpretations, and we shouldn't be falling for all these carny tricks, loaded questions, various logical fallacies. Visual literacy steers a lot of people in wild directions. People don't know what's real and fake, and I just think that we should have higher standards, which we do. Okay, let's see. Janky Frame Cover says there's a giant Freemason symbol just southeast of the 9/11 Memorial at the International Peace Garden in North Dakota. You can find it on Google Earth. I will take a look at that. Okay, it looks like internationalpeacegarden.com, and I have an image of it here. I see it. Now I'll see if I can get some better images of it. It looks like is that a square and compass type thing? Very interesting. Okay, moving on here. Jamitra 101 says Trump's first magazine cover was in 1980 and had a Q on the top left. I have it. Yeah, let me point that out too. The Q movement is like the Mandela effect. It's real. The Q drops are real, but it's planted, predictive programming, truther, chicken feed, misdirection. But it's real. It's a real psyop. We know who's behind a large part of it. But its claims are fake. That's the point. The claims are fake. But it's part of a story that goes back, clearly. No, and there's hardly anything original about it. In fact, you can find evidence that there was a QAnon movement years ago. They tried to create this Q thing. So there's nothing new about it. But what they have done is they've created this umbrella conspiracy theory, which basically puts all the conspiracy theories under one. And instead of saying it's the Jews, which is critical Jew theory, they put a Q. They put the deep state logo on it, like the deep state label. Like this is the deep state, the cabal, the traffickers, the adrenochrome drinkers. So they repackaged old conspiracy theories, and then they brought out the salesman, Donald Trump. And if you vote for him, he will solve the conspiracies. He will bring it all to the light, from darkness to light. The children in the tunnels will be released. And it was a major misinformation campaign. Remember the tunnel children, the underground wars. There'd be QAnoners posting stuff saying, oh, I felt an earthquake. I think that there's bombs going on and the deep state is taking hits from the Navy SEALs or whatever, the super soldiers who are fighting these wars. It's like this constant buzz of activity, but only they knew about it. A big example of, I mean, it's a big demonstration of this emperor's new clothes phenomenon, where everybody pretends to see, they all want to pretend to be in the know. A bunch of larpers. You could forgive them to a point, but after the election and January 6th, and that was revealed to be a major hoax, and Trump is obviously in on it, that's unforgivable. And anybody who still trusts the plan or thinks that Trump is somehow rogue or he's going to do something to fight the deep state, yeah, this is WWE. You know, the bad guy and the good guy are both fake. And the idea that he has anything to do with revealing truth or fighting a deep state, yeah, this is just comic book narrative. It's just a story. I mean, it is that simple. There's no reality behind it, because if there was, he wouldn't have faked getting his ear shot by an AR-15. And it wasn't just him faking it. It wasn't like he faked it to get sympathy and show the Democrats. No, both sides of this thing from the very top signed off on this. And this was, again, scripted long in advance, along with all this other Q drama. And the Q thing is largely a dog whistle in many ways, so they can get the conspiracy theorists to think that they're part of this story and that they're fighting a war. Let me bring up this Economist cover. I brought it up the other day, called The Weaker Sex. The weaker sex. Blue collar men in rich countries are in trouble. They must learn to adapt. This is from 2015, pre-Q. So keep that in mind. And it looks like a guy in a MAGA hat inside of a Q. But it's the male sign, broken and pointed down. But this is foreshadowing. And I think this is part of the structural takedown of the far right concepts of what they call toxic masculinity, nationalism, everything they're trying to get rid of. In many ways, the MAGA person is kind of a straw man they created. Okay, moving on here. Elephant Tusk says, this isn't Q, it's part of the spiritual war. They take the orders from the Red Queen of Babylon. Tasty conspiracy candy there. Leo Pirate says, Sound of Freedom boomer agitprop. I watched it. I went to the theater and watched it, and it was like I was there in the top far left corner with my clipboard taking notes, and it seemed like it was about 15 people there, or 15 couples, and they all looked the same. Some guy with the MAGA, not MAGA hat, but it was basically like MAGA couples, I could tell. But what they did, the company's called Angel. They allowed you to purchase tickets for other people to go see it. And so they falsely inflated the numbers. They falsely inflated its popularity. They said this is more popular than the new Indiana Jones. No, these are empty theaters. And there was a marketing campaign that involved social media influencers claiming that they were putting nanobots in the drinks, that they were turning off the air conditioner when they saw the movie starting. They had this entire marketing campaign to create buzz, but it was a terrible movie. One thing I did take out of the movie, aside from the irony of the person it's about, Tim Ballard, turns out the guy's a human trafficker himself. There's a whole Me Too controversy around him. Lied about his connections to the Mormon Church. The whole thing is just projection. You know, these people are not saving children. These people are just exploiters. But part of the movie has him receiving a little pendant from someone he rescues, a child he rescues, and it says Tim 611. And I'm like, whoa, Timothy McVeigh executed 611? No, it's some Bible verse, Timothy 611, which is intrinsic to the story. But this ties into Ephesians 611 in the armor of God, and all these other 611s associated with Trump. So then Jim Caviezel, who plays Tim Ballard, is watching the movie with Donald Trump, and Jim Caviezel played Jesus when he was 33. Now he's a big Q superstar. Connected to Mel Gibson. Supposedly, Jim Caviezel died during Passion of the Christ. He's 33 years old, playing Jesus. Mel Gibson is filming, and lightning strikes him during the Sermon on the Mount on take 5, and he dies. But they brought him back to life. So Jim Caviezel and Donald Trump are watching this movie together. And again, it's all about the 611. I mean, think about the code here and how consistent this is. Because Trump gets shot at 611 and 33 seconds. So 611 has been this code built into the Q movement, into the right-wing militia movement since Timothy McVeigh's death, 3 months before 9/11. So it's just not a coincidence here that Trump is shot at 6/11, and all the people who watch Sound of Freedom are like, oh, it's the armor of God. Steve Bannon, it's the armor of God protected him. But yeah, that was absolutely agitprop, and it was a garbage movie. Jim Caviezel, though, since he claims Jesus and he's sitting next to Trump, he said, no, Trump is now King David. Why not just bump him up there? I thought he was kind of Moses-y. They were hinting at Moses-y, like he may not live to see the MAGA land, the promised land. And then, of course, he's arrested on MLK's assassination date. I'm pretty sure they've upgraded him. Now he's just God. Tim and Vic 131 says, good evening, Rafters. Mango Penguin says, have you heard about the fish they caught off the coast called the Doomsday Fish? Nope, post a link. Isabel Ann says, watch out for the Mpox chemtrails coming soon. I've already seen that rumor spreading. They're showing images of like airplanes and for various reasons. Like one's doing a fuel dump, but they'll share that and they'll say, look, it's dumping these toxic chemicals. And they said that Bill Gates is going to dump monkeypox on you. The monkeypox is a psyop. There's a Vince Vaughn movie, Bad Monkey, that came out the exact same moment that this thing was declared an emergency. It's an obvious hoax. It may have some tie-ins, though. I believe that the monkeypox is a tie-in to 28 Days Later, the rage virus. And the director of 28 Days Later, where you have the rage virus that comes from the monkeys, he directed Civil War, in which a Kamala Harris kills Trump, basically. So I happen to think that the monkeypox is a psyop to reference the mind virus or the rage virus that's going to afflict the political right wing. That's what I think it's for. I also coined a term after I saw someone spreading that nonsense, Bill Gatesophobia. Bill Gatesophobia. So if you think that Elon Muskophobes are redonkulous, well, if you're scared of Bill Gates, you're just as ridiculous. There are people who think he's going to block the sun. It's like, what is he, some kind of a god? Some demigod? Like Sauron? Like, yeah, he can block the sun. Give me a break. Leo Pirate says they're funded by Mormons and made a video review about it on the release date as well. Yeah, it's very questionable, the entire thing. Mormonism is interesting. Joseph Smith is interesting. Brigham Young, their Masonic connections, their lore. I consider it to be Masonic Christianity. I've only attended one service, and they had this sort of imitation Eucharist. And I don't know if it was like bread and water instead of bread and wine, but anyway, this imitation Eucharist might have been a crouton in a paper cup. It just didn't have the solemnity of a Catholic Mass. It was actually more of a sales pitch where instead of hearing from the Bible and these various parables and tying it to current events, it was just one person after another talking about how they found the missionary. It changed their life. I felt like it was a sales pitch, like multi-level marketing. Riley says, Q exploits Christian belief system. Yeah, it is. It's a government-created religion. It's an amalgamation of Christianity, of New Ageism, and the cult of personality built around Trump. Did you hear them saying Don's ear piercing means he's a Levitical priest? I haven't heard that. Wouldn't shock me. And this is mystification of the news. So think about how I talk about synchromystics will say, the predictive programming means the dark wizards had to tell us what they're going to do so karma doesn't blow back against them, which is an interesting concept, but flawed. But I don't think that's the correct explanation. It's mystifying it. And if you're saying, oh, Trump was shot at, but God saved him, you didn't examine the possibility the event was fake. And then I question your God, who's going to save one person and then let the fireman die. Like, couldn't he have steered the bullet so it didn't hurt anybody? No, obviously not. Okay, let's see. There's something I saw here. Oh yeah, Flux. I actually picked up this book on the random I think. Oh, you know what? Let me turn the ringer back on. Sorry, I had it off. If you want to call back, go ahead. I picked up this book called Flux. It's kind of like Breaking Bad in a way, but it's like about this. It's sort of science fictiony. But the idea is that there's this drug that you snort it, and it allows you to manipulate probability, to select from the realm of possibility, to do what you would consider to be magic. And there's various ways that it manifests depending on the person and what their main focus is on. But flux is what they call it when you bend reality, and then when it tries to put itself back into place, it tends to bowl you over in some way. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, what's up,
It's
caller?
Leo Pirate from chat.
Oh, yeah, you had something to say about Sound of Freedom.
Yeah, and an angle that I think I've kind of observed over time. I think everyone here probably knows about the religious angle around Trump being, either you see him as the Antichrist or the savior of mankind, one or the other. Uh, the weird thing about it is there's so much predictive programming that's twisting the Bible to the point where people on both sides are doing everything except actually taking the Bible as it reads. And with Mormonism, like the LDS Church, you talked about how you attended a service. I did an investigation into them as well. I see the LDS Church Mormonism as like American Catholicism. Did you get that vibe at all while you were there?
Yeah, I did. I did see it to be something of a sanitized secular version of the Catholic Mass.
It's like a new world Catholic Church, and I've read all Joseph Smith's writing, Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, Pearl of Great Price, and like the Roman papacy, they believe the land, like America, is a holy ground. And the craziest thing about it is they have a prophecy, like prophecies from the 1830s, where Joseph Smith talked about the restoration of Israel all the way back in the 1830s, predating political Zionism by nearly 70 years. And I don't know if you're aware, Donald Trump is a huge, huge advocate of the political state of Israel. He moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. And, just to be clear, I'm not one of those,
No, but this is
blame the Jews for
interesting.
everything.
I mean, could it? There was some statement attributed to Albert Pike about predicting three world wars, and that may be something here, considering Joseph Smith's and Brigham Young's connection to the Scottish Rite Freemasonry. So I'm wondering, are we looking at? Because one thing that's consistent with New Age and the Freemasonic thing is this idea of the great work of ages, writing history out hundreds of years into the future, 1,000 years in the future, by millennium, by aeons, as they call it. And so it wouldn't shock me if he had some kind of stories or narratives suggesting what the future would be. But what do you think it originates from?
So, yeah, I'm actually quite aware of Pike's letter to Mazzini, with the Third World War being uh, political Islam and political Judaism destroying each other to usher in the final age of Luciferianism. Um, so Zionism of itself is a very old idea, again, coming from Freemasonry. It stems from British Israelism. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't. But really quick here, just want to add, birth of the Scottish Rite was 1801, and the birth of Mormonism was 1830. So if there was any sort of predictions of the future or any sort of historical projections involved in that with that letter you mentioned, I'm not sure, possibly some overlap. Just bringing up these dates for context. But please go on.
Yeah, and I guess the thing that I'm most interested in is this idea. Mormonism is kind of, I think people just see it as a joke. Everyone thinks it's just funny. There was that South Park episode. There was a Broadway musical about it. No one takes it seriously. But I don't want to take up your whole show. The idea I'm just trying to say is I highly recommend your great team of researchers and you really consider the LDS Church as a real player in future hoaxes.
Okay.
Sound of Freedom is what really made me hip to it because the whole you watched it, and that's amazing that you and I both saw it opening day. Just because I wanted to see how ridiculous this Q propaganda would be, and the whole film about Tim Ballard. Not once does it mention that he's Mormon. Not once in the film. Instead, they are merging evangelical Christianity, Q, whatever. Like
Oh,
I
I
call it
see. I
Trumpiana.
see. Okay, okay. No,
Yeah,
in my book, Secret Religion of the Elite, I was describing how outer space is this universal heaven that all the other religions will adhere to. And one thing about Mormonism is that it's post-Copernican revolution, and it's very, I think, copacetic with the idea of mankind becoming multiplanetary. Same with Scientology. So I think that we do have some of these religions that have been configured for the new age to be universalized, and it wouldn't shock me at all. And I know there's the cartoon version of the celestial kingdoms, the telestial kingdom, and all that, but I do think that it does contain this, I think, compatibility with the modern heliocentric model and science fiction heaven of outer space.
absolutely. I made the same exact observation while reading it because a lot of the stuff in that cartoon are not actually in Book of Mormon. It's found in Pearl of Great Price, the Book of Abraham from it. But in Book of Mormon, one of the books, the Book of Alma, they interrogate their version of Antichrist, a man named Korihor. And while they're speaking to him, they're interrogating him. They said, "Don't you know God created the sun, moon, and stars, and the planets and the galaxies?" Now, I'm sure I don't know if you know from the Bible. Yes, God created the heavens and the earth, sun, moon, and stars. Didn't get into galaxies or planets. That's not in the Bible, but it's
Exactly.
conspicuously
It's a
added in Book of Mormon.
Yeah, it's certainly far more compatible with the modern paradigm and the future with the space heaven. So yeah, it's certainly updated. Very interesting. Very interesting observation there.
Cool. Just wanted to put that out there because I don't even think your show is about Mormonism or anything. I just
Well,
wanted
we,
to
we do
let
talk
everyone
about
know.
we do talk about the various facets though of these religions, which the programming class uses on the programs, these worldview filters. And I think that it's interesting to note how they're all structurally similar. I was really fascinated to learn about the endowment rights and retroactive baptisms and all this. That stuff's very interesting. But the Masonic symbols on the Mormon underwear, all that stuff to me is very much relevant here because we're talking about elders and a secret society for all intents and purposes. And that's where I find this to be interesting because it seems to me that what we're really looking at here is a hidden caste system where you have the program class and the programmers who are at various levels of awareness about the big picture, but they're all actively part of worldview maintenance for the sheeple. And so I do study all these different religions, and it's certainly relevant. One quick question here: what do you think of the stories about his treasure hunting exploits and his Jupiterian magic or his planetary magic? Have you looked into that?
And him finding the golden plates. I know of the stories. I know he was convicted of juggling in upstate New York. That was the term they used for trying to speak to spirits, for conjuring, I think. Yeah, they called it juggling. I don't know why. I've seen the scan of that. I found that so funny. But I don't know about the esoteric elements to it. But a thing I do believe is much like Catholicism's ascendancy in the old world was established with false miracles. The old versions of programming through faked events. I truly believe the Latter Day Saints Church will have a similar rise in this country with fake miracles. I wouldn't be surprised if the LDS president, but by the way, I don't know if you know about their structure. They have a pope. The LDS president's their living prophet. Utah is actually a mini theocracy within the United States. It's one of the only states that still allows execution by firing squad because of their view of blood atonement. But I wouldn't be surprised if the LDS president walks out of their Salt Lake City temple holding the golden plates. I wouldn't be surprised if they start excavating parts of Zarahemla from the book. So much of the mockery that's been shoveled at Mormonism is even prophesied within the Book of Mormon. It's a very self-fulfilling prophecy. They say everyone will mock and treat you as a byword and a hiss. But
Okay,
yeah,
well, interesting material, and thanks for the call, and we'll probably talk about this some more. So thanks again. I have another
For
caller
sure.
coming in. Thank you. Infinite Plane Radio. Okay, it looks like the second caller just dropped it. So really quick here, Joseph Smith wore a Jupiter talisman around his neck and married as many wives on astrologically advantageous dates. Kind of like Tom Cruise divorcing all his
Oh,
wives at 33. Hey, what's up,
hold
caller?
on, bro. Let me turn my TV off.
Conscious Daughter says, I could answer some questions about the LDS Church growing up around nothing but Mormons. Yeah, I have to
Man,
say, well, really quick here.
I had a good
I've
conversation with an old school homie of mine like 10 minutes ago, and we went through plumbing school together for like 4 years. We used to work together, and guess what? He's a Freemason. He's been a Freemason for a long time. And he's not a weird dude. I mean, he's a weird dude, but he's not a bad guy. I don't think he's a bad guy. Like, so all this time in the back of my mind, I've been like, you know what? These guys are the bad guys. Those guys, the Rosicrucians, the fucking Skull and Bones. You know what? The bad guys within. We're all the bad guy. Everyone has the ability to be the good or the bad.
I
And as
disagree.
soon as you point
I
the finger
disagree.
at a group,
I wait, hold on.
and
I way too often people say, I know Masons. All they do is they get away from their wives and they have a steak dinner once a week. That's all it is. It's like no, you're talking about a group that has an initiation oath and a structure built upon a division between the profane and those who have seen the
isn't
light.
that every religion on the planet though?
No,
Like
no,
every religion wants you to be
not
a part of like this thing.
well in a vague sense. But we're talking about security clearances. We're talking about a secret society that is actively promoting deception as a way of ruling over the lesser informed. So no, there's a structural thing built into it. It's systemically
There's a
built on
difference.
deception. So even though your friend might be a great person, sure, but you can't say just because my friend is a normie, a normal guy, it doesn't mean that this archaic institution he's a part of isn't structurally part of the programming classes uh, machinations, one of their big juggernauts, in fact.
We can say that about all religions then, right? Like, so we could say, you know, there's good Catholics, there's good Jews, there's good Muslims. But overall, organized thought, where they say you have to put all your ideas into the bubble, and if you venture out the parameters of this organized thought set, then you are a dissident and you should be punished.
No, I'm
That's
saying, okay, I'm
wrong.
saying the dynamic is here is the priesthood. The priesthood claiming to have God's eyes view, whether it's astronauts or priests who claim to be closer to God than the sheeple that they're preaching to. The dynamic there is what I'm talking about. The thing though that's specific to the Freemasonic thing and various occult groups is the oaths. And if you read the oaths and you just follow their own words, yeah, it describes the people outside in a wilderness of darkness. But these days,
Oh,
it's
I
not
don't
even.
like
Wait, but
the
these days, it's
idea of
not even about
oath.
the Masons.
I
To
don't
me,
know
it's
that
about the
oath
media.
is that.
The media is the
It's pretty.
main player here, and there is a bifurcation in society between those who are on one side of the screen and the very few on the other. And so everybody is equally, I think, programmed and deceived at a certain level. Deprogramming is an act of volition.
So what do you recommend then? What are we supposed to do? If we're all programmed either on this side of the screen or that side of the screen, how do we live without interfering or interrupting or screwing over other people?
Um, I'm not sure if I understand your question. I think what I'm saying is that
How do we live in peace? If we're all programmed, how do we live a programmed life without doing harm?
well,
What should we do?
most of the harm is self-inflicted, unless you're Antifa throwing rocks. For the most part, though, it's the toxic bond between the authority and the believers that now are susceptible to God constructs like the wrath of Gaia, the nuke, space junk, all the scary things that they tell you that aren't real, that are real, the hyperstitions. But this is I'm just saying here, is that we are clearly in a world divided between those who believe and those who know. And the believers make up the masses. And I'm just saying that the evidence that we have, based on who perpetrates, based on their own symbolism, based on what we're observing here. I mean, take the Truman Show. You cannot take the Masonic symbolism out of that movie. So my point being is that the argument that Masons are just benevolent, yeah, maybe it's not such a big deal, but that's kind of ignoring the fact that they're a major player, or at least the philosophy behind it is at play in the psychological operations. And I think it has to do with the secrecy, compartmentalization, the oaths, the NDAs, the filtration of people into those in the know, aside from those who are profane outside the temple.
What if to control a world, it's almost like an organism, just like your body has a bone structure, has a muscular structure, it has a circulatory structure, right? To control the world in a secretive way to keep all the masses under. What if all these different groups, Masonry or whoever, Rosicrucians, there's probably dozens and dozens of groups. They all serve different purposes in different capacities on different levels. So some are like a structure, and some are like a neural structure, some are like a muscular structure, meaning like maybe the cops are on one level, the fire department's on another level, the entertainment structure's on another level, but all together it acts as an organism to keep the masses asleep, a slave, buying,
Yes,
selling,
and
just
it's keep in mind too, the masses that conform the most to the screen are its own reinforcers. So you say, oh, it's the elite. Well, no, it's your next door neighbor who's been programmed by the elite. So you have the programming class, but they're still 99% programmed by necessity. They're only let out 1% on that particular thing they're involved in. So if they're involved in fabricating terror attacks and they're part of some intelligence agency, that's all they're going to know about. They're not going to know about the fake moon landing. So the programming class would include entertainers who are just mouthpieces, reading prompted messages, given scripts, and they may not know the full import of what they're a part of. Whereas the directors probably do. The directors know, yeah, you're basically
so
drilling
for
them.
all the people out there that were looking for shooter number 2, shooter number 3, you've missed the whole plot. Listen, I mean, we can all have like our favorite characters in the WWE and Hulk Hogan and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's just all a big movie. So like they're all in on it on both sides. So don't fall in love with the plots or the stories or the characters. Just know like everybody's involved. So don't get butthurt when you find out your favorite guy or your favorite girl. They're all involved.
Yeah, let me answer your question. Like, what do we do? Enjoy peace of mind. Have you ever considered that the default position is internal war, mind war, and apathy to the mind war, but
What, like
believing in
there's
it. But
nothing we can do? There's nothing we can do. Just be happy to be alive, I guess. So like
well,
at the end
what
of the
would you do?
day,
What would you do? I mean, are you
nothing
going
we
to?
there's nothing anybody could do. Right? Like it could be way worse. You could like not exist. You could just be like a pile of dirt. But you are alive and here now to like
Well, there is
witness the
something you can
world.
do. It's called
That's pretty
conscientious.
cool.
There's conscientious objection. There's self-education for sure. You can think, but I think overall here, the
Should
resistance
we
is
should we
resistance
try
is
to change the
futile.
world? Like
Resistance
is
is
that
futile.
like a responsibility to try to like control other? I don't want to tell other people what to think. I don't know what to think. So like every time I have an idea, I just say this is what I'm thinking now. It could go in 5 minutes, and this is just what I'm thinking. But I'm
Well,
not
I
telling
am,
anybody
to be
else.
honest, I am concerned with the philosophical crisis of our time. I say resistance is futile in the sense of thinking you can fight it from within. What can we do? It's what I'm doing right here. Why do you think we've consolidated all of the best axioms related to media hoax deconstruction? Like we are building a compendium of ideas, of approaches, of methodologies for dissecting the news and not getting caught up. We're the ones who made a distinction between the simulated news model and the real world, which we call here the world stage. We're the ones who highlighted the existence of the metascript. So when people express the idea that information, that the knowledge is useless, there's nothing to do, I'm like, where are you coming from? Like, this is the group that has weaponized and used all the information that we have gleaned so far, and we have taken strides towards assembling a cohesive picture. Like, this is the only place on the internet where you're going to find clarity with regard to what media really is. So, this is not the place to express futility in the ability to know what's knowable. Like, no, that's exactly what we should be aiming for. That's why we're so agnostic, because we don't have enough information to rush to the conclusions that the believers have all glommed onto.
Well, fuck, Tim. I love you to death, man, but it's depressing at times. I'm sorry.
What's
You're
depressing?
right.
What's depressing? Nobody died, nobody cried. Nobody died on
Nobody
10/6.
died, nobody cried,
Nukes are
but like
fake.
they have a way to get to you. Like if you watch TV for too long, it will get in your brain. So that's why we call in. We have to like reformulate. We have to like restructure at times. And so you know what? It's just getting to me.
I
And
haven't been
it's
fooled by a
part of the
single
reason
news
that
story in at least 5 years. 2020 didn't even fool me. Not for a second. Sorry, but like I've been inoculated.
bullshit.
Not
Tim,
bullshit.
I love you,
I have
but
a
I
record.
remember when freaking the kid, what's his name? The kid with the shooting. For a minute, he almost had you, and I remember calling it as like, I think it could be fake. You're like, I don't know. I remember for a minute you believed it for a second. So we all fall in. Like
No,
there's times where we
I
think
look.
are
The
good.
axiom is fake until proven real. If I don't have facts, I'm not going to call it real. That's why I don't believe in anything without evidence, and I'm always emphatic about making that point because no, I'm not saying maybe the media is not lying this time. No, it is a liar. It is a filter. The question is, what are they lying about this time?
Okay.
So no, I'm not depressed. Haven't been fooled. My mind's not blown, and I'm not confused whatsoever. And I don't think you should be either. This is the one
Joe
place.
Rogan hasn't gotten to you yet.
No, 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 no. I've already reversed all the damage. What I'm saying is the deprogramming. I no longer believe in nukes. You know how much stress that takes off of me? I was an NBC. I was 54 Bravo. If anybody should be scared of nukes, it should have been me. My whole job was training an air defense unit on how to deal with nuclear fallout. I don't believe in nukes.
Could you imagine all the training and fucking all the like hazardous material, everything that goes into a military to like train people for something that doesn't even exist? It must be in the millions of dollars, tax-paying dollars for something that's not even real. That's crazy, man.
Yep, absolutely.
I mean, I was in the army. I was a parachute rigger. I was in peacetime. There was no war when I was in. But still, like, I mean, like, how many people are just going in to do something, and like, it's like non-existent,
So you,
like
you packed
NBC.
parachutes. Did you jump?
Yeah, you have to be a parachute rigger. There's like there's two MOSs in the military where you have to be airborne. One is rigger. You can't pack parachutes without being airborne. And the other one is special forces. If you're a Green Beret, you have to be
Yeah, like if you're a chef,
airborne.
you should eat your own food. If you're a tattoo artist, you should
You
have
have to eat
tattoos,
your own
and
food.
you're.
You can't be a vegetarian chef in the Army. You got to know how to make hamburgers in the Army.
Yeah, I was in Fort Lee for a little while, attached to 23rd
Me too.
Quartermasters,
Yeah.
and I met a. I
Yeah,
was
yeah. That's where I went for AIT too.
okay. I was hanging out with those AIT soldiers. I was doing my mortuary affairs training there, so I was hanging out with parachute riggers, and I'd watch them in this big room, like packing and unpacking the parachutes, and they're told like, if it doesn't open, you're going to be charged with murder. I'm like, what a tremendous responsibility to pack some stranger's parachute. Like I wouldn't be able to sleep at night.
Yeah, it was crazy. When I was in, it was okay, so basically I was like a holdover. So I go through all my basic training, and for some reason, my orders don't come up to get shipped to my base. So I have to sit at AIT for like an extra month, and that's when 9/11 happens. So I'm sitting there in this holdover company just hanging out and waiting to get sent to Fort Bragg and everything. And then 9/11 happened, and freaking we spend basically 20 years in the Middle East, and I don't even really know what it's all for at the end of the day. It's just we've been living in conspiracy world for like the last basically since I'm in my 40s now. Since I was in my early 20s, we've been living in freaking make believe land, and it's like and then I find about like that the world was flat like when I'm 30. I'm like, oh my God, I thought I knew what the world was. I memorized all these facts about the galaxy and the Milky Way. I used to watch science shows, and then I'm like, I don't know anything about the world. Where the hell am I? What is it all for, and what am I supposed to do? I guess I don't know anything.
That's why I like the Truman Show and the idea of the fool, because the fool's only called the fool because it's the beginning of the journey, and he's recognizing, hey, I don't have all the answers. And so you have to recognize that you're dupable and you've been duped. You have to recognize you've been programmed in order to work your way out of it. And a lot of people can't even do what you just did. A lot of people cannot shed their ego attachment to what they believed to be true, and they can't accept they've been lied to majorly, that they're in a magic show. And that's a barrier for a lot of people. And I don't have that barrier. I can entertain ideas and not accept them. And that's what we do here. So I appreciate you
Oh yeah.
calling. And
Like
as always,
I'm willing to go back in. I'm willing to admit that I don't have all the answers. Maybe I have it wrong. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe the world is a ball. But when there's certain people, when you try to even just present the idea, what if you don't know anything? Would it just like think about it for a second? You see them like cringe and like their eyes like start blinking, like it breaks their brain. I'm like, there's certain people that can never accept for even a second that their whole world is upside down. I don't care either way. I don't care if the world's a ball or if it's a pizza. I just want to know the truth. There's
same
certain
here.
people.
Same here. The globies the glurfs who really are defensive and insecure about their ball. I'm like, they really care. And I'm like, you know what? Please convince me it's a ball. I would love it to be true because I think science fiction's cool. I read science fiction. I watch science fiction. I don't believe in science fiction. But if you can convince me your science fiction's real, I will believe it. But I haven't seen evidence. So, absent any evidence of a curve, I can't even presume that the Earth is a discrete object floating somewhere.
Listen, I was watching like Mr. Wizard's World in like the mid '80s, like 1984. I was watching every science show as far back as I can remember. Nova, like going back to like the mid '80s, like when like CGI first came out and all they had to do, the ability to was do like real simple animations of planets. I used to love that shit. Like we were, when fucking like Star Trek: The Next Generation came out, you know how many people bought into it just because of the opening scene? You have Jean-Luc Picard with this cool accent saying space. Like, dude, I'm like, sign me up, bro. I want to go. I
Oh,
want to go on
yeah.
that spaceship right now with it. You know what I mean? Like, you just have to have a cool English guy with a cool accent, and people will buy into that shit. They bought a whole generation of young dudes born in the 70s, early 80s. We were just like, I want to go to space. Like if the old Star Trek didn't get you, the new Star Trek got you, and they got me too. And I didn't even think for a second until I was in my 30s that maybe I had it all wrong.
Hey, let me run this by you. Okay, Jean-Luc Picard, Final Frontier. We're talking about space, the Final Frontier, Star Trek. So he's known for what? Going really high, going really far out there. And
Remember how they used to show like Jupiter and everything? I was like, holy fuck! I can't believe they can make planets
but
look
but
that
listen to this one.
realistic.
So
I really
you
thought it
got
was real.
but listen,
You
you got
realize like, at the time,
you got
I thought they were really sending.
but I want to show you
I
these.
really thought they
These
were
are
sending.
archetypes. So this is the archetype. You got Jean-Luc Picard, and then you have Auguste Picard. Auguste Picard, remember the guy who went up in the hydrogen balloon and set a record for altitude? So two
Yeah,
different
like
Picards.
in the early 1900s, this was like the first guy. They didn't even have the ability to turn it around at the time, so like they would have like one side black and one side white, and they
Now
would have
next
to
though,
spin it
look at
around to
this one.
control the temperature.
Admiral James T. Kirk. So you got Captain Kirk, and then you have Captain Cook. Well, what is Captain Cook? He's the guy that went around Antarctica, who explored
Right.
the frontier. So this is and he wrote his captain's log, and you can read his captain's logs. So I'm saying that Captain Kirk is a reboot of Captain Cook, and that Jean-Luc Picard has some kind of historical analog in Auguste Picard, this guy in his capsule going really high up.
Oh yeah, like we can find this thing over and over again where people's names are like what they're known for. Like Princess Di, she died. She was a queen and then she died. Like her name is what you remember her for doing.
Yeah. Oh,
Trump.
or
Trump
the
is the president of like America, and like I love him in so many ways because like I just fucking love America. But in a way, like Trump like means win, and like his name's like the Don. It's like I think his name means like in a way it almost means like world emperor, or like the horn of the world emperor. Like there's so many characters that you could find in the meta script where it's like that they're a character just by their name. And we've gone through it a million times. I'll bet we could find at least a dozen people. We could all chime in the group, name somebody their name is linked to
there's a
what
recent
you
one.
know
A
them
recent
for.
one is the Calypso capsule that has those astronauts stranded. Calypso was the nymph who strands Odysseus. So here they are on their space odyssey, And like Calypso from the Odyssey, their space capsule Calypso strands them, and they're still stranded. You call that nominative determinism, and they use that all throughout the world stage. With all these fake characters, their names are definitely a clue as to their purpose. We see this quite often.
And you're convinced that they're all following orders. And like, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying sometimes I feel like what if they're like subliminally programmed and like we're just like living in this dream world and only like a very small percentage of us can actually see it, and they're not following orders. They're just like doing what they were programmed
But
to
where do
do.
you draw the
They
line?
don't really know
Where
what
do you
they're
draw the
doing.
line? Where do you draw the line? Crisis actors, the police, the people who are filming the fake events, like who would be unaware that they're playing a fake role for fake news? Because it's not just like they're doing these pre-programmed things and recording it. These are stars in what you could consider to be reality TV shows. There's
Okay,
no
so is it possible that some people are meta scripters that are programmers and predictors and they're in on the script, but maybe some people at the lower levels, maybe, I don't know, the extras are subliminally programmed, like, I don't know, MK Ultra. Is that possible?
I think it'd just be veils of ignorance where they just don't have the
Yeah.
security clearance. That's all you would need. Veils of ignorance. And that's done through compartmentalization. In the military, for example, you're not allowed to go to certain areas if you don't have a certain clearance. I couldn't see up close the PAC-3 missile systems. It's designed that way. So I don't have to be programmed with MK Ultra. I just need to be gate kept from getting that information. And that's what we're dealing with all the time anyway, is the gatekeeping of knowledge. That's pretty much what defines the lie world order's structure.
Okay.
Okay, anyway, appreciate the call as always, and call back anytime. John Ploner, hey, what's your hourly rate? Elephant Tusks wants to know. I think he's got some kind of a
Um,
plug.
Side jobs in Florida, like 100 an hour. If you're in the IPS group in Florida, man, in Southwest Florida, man, I give you a really good rate. If you see, John the plumber in Southwest Florida, but like, if I don't know you, it's at least 100 an hour.
Sounds good. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care, brother.
Likewise. Okay, let's see what we have here. Yeah, we were talking about these historic analogs, nominative determinism, the definers of the boundary. So the boundary was Antarctica, but now it's the final frontier. We had a caller speaking a bit about Mormonism and about how compatible it could be with the one world order's future, where humanity becomes multi-planetary. All right, phones are still open. Whether Joseph Smith did planetary magic or not, a lot of this stuff, who knows? I mean, I don't trust what the critics of religions often say about these religions. I find it to be it tends to be very biased, and people get their version of things from TV, like South Park or something. Same with Scientology. And you can laugh at Xenu, you can laugh at Scientology, but when you look at it closely, it's a religion that is based upon the pandemic model. Only replace viruses with mind viruses. And what are we dealing with right now? The public is being educated about mind viruses and the need to mentally inoculate ourselves against, and they just define it as, of course, misinformation, conspiracy theories, whatever they deem to be toxic misinformation. But the Scientology concept is based on the idea that the world has been infected with mind viruses, which they call engrams. And you get rid of engrams through going to the church, which puts you into a quarantine. And it becomes increasingly about the quarantine and disconnecting from those in your family who won't join because they're presumed to be infected because the world's infected. And their objective as a church is to clear the world of mind viruses. Again, they call them engrams, but these are things you passively receive that you can't inoculate yourself against them. That if you go around somebody or you have an experience in the world, you can catch one of these things, and it could be anything. And the idea is that and this is part of Dianetics, and the theory is that your mind is always recording, nothing is missed, and everything is somehow associated, overtly coupling various events or things with places, and it's just like the world's now a very dangerous place because you go out there, you're going to catch an engram. Somebody's going to say some word that's triggering and it's going to link to some sensory perception. And now you have to go through therapy, use your e-meter, and get that engram taken off of your timeline. But when you get down to it, you got bunkers, you got the ship, you got quarantine, but it's all about quarantine. And quarantine is it's almost like a new version of, like, I think you would consider it to be asceticism in a way. But yes, it's a religion based on the virus model. And that's why it's so, I think, intrinsic. Tom Cruise, and if you look at the role of how Scientology is presented, it's mostly movie stars. Movies are so intrinsic to this world and our worldview, and the pageantry that they give us is like the Bible of our time. I call the mainstream media the world state church, but yeah, Scientology is completely aligned with all of that. Lean Dion, Derek Chauvin. Yeah, Derek Chauvin is one of the best examples of nominative determinism. The first name, Derek, means hangman, basically. There's actually part of a crane called the Derek. And then, of course, chauvinism. You've got the whole thing with Western chauvinists, Proud Boys. So you have, with Derek Chauvin, or Derek Western chauvinism, you have the perfect example of the hangman of the West asphyxiating George Floyd, who represents the poor or the lower class in this Marxist class warfare structure, where Derek Western chauvinism represents the power structure. I can't breathe is said by the lower class and by Gaia, who can't breathe because the West is polluting everything. So we call him Derek Western chauvinism. 846, obvious code. 9/11 starts at 846. The sun sets in the Twin Cities on that day, 846. It's all tied in to the death of the sun god. This is just contemporary myth making. 9/11 is a contemporary myth. That's why they do it. They use myths and big stories to write our history. But to write our history, it's more than just implementing psyops and then inserting them into the historic record when no one's looking. No, they create, in a very heavy-handed way, major events that reframe our collective perspective. That's why the atom bomb is so important. Put us all on the same sheet. The moon landing. We all went to the moon. 9/11. We all experienced the advent of the modern age of terror. 2020. We all locked down. With each of these global psyops, we're collectively synchronized. That's why these events are so significant. And these events are myths for all intents and purposes. Or you could call them historical events, but they are tied into so many other elements. It's beyond just the cop killing someone in an act of brutality, but it ties into it these bigger themes. Again, about the West and what the West is doing to the world. And then you have the dialectic between the Proud Boys and the Western chauvinists and the BLM and the Marxist critique of the West. And 1619 versus 1776, all of this stuff is the stuff that they use to define the major ideological struggles of our time, and it's all fabricated. Okay, I'm going through your comments. Someone mentioned Utah, the beehive state. Yeah, the beehive is a symbol of the Templars as well. Elephant Tusk says, Tim, what's the premise of the Jehovah's Witnesses? I was never a Jehovah's Witness, but I was almost recruited by one, and I had a bunch. I've always admired their literature at the laundromats. In fact, I'm using their marketing methods for part of how the IPS Insider is going to spread. I used to collect cult literature. If there was like this, like pre-internet, before I was very online, I did everything on the ground. Like, I would gather up materials. If there's some crazy person passing out flyers, I would go get them. I think I learned about King Kill 33 and the JFK stuff from some lady who was always talking about fluoride in the water at city council meetings. J.Y. Barra, always here. Thank you for joining. Lean Dion says Elon is the super spreader. Oh yeah, Disease X. Okay, Janky Frame Covers, you DM me on the X. I will get that symbol. I'll take a look at it. Conscious Daughter says Brigham Young was responsible for dozens of massacres of Native Americans in the state. To go even further, they named cities and towns of the leaders who led the massacre. Not surprising. Religions killing people? And just to be clear, even though we are describing the workings of the PSYOP entertainment complex, doesn't mean that we're denialists about the facts of reality, of history. Like death is real, people die, people kill. But there's a point, and I'm not sure exactly when. Maybe we entered the Truman Show in 1945. I don't know. But there was a point where it was collectively agreed upon that mankind is collectively synchronized through mass media and its pageantries, that we can put them all into a simulation. And so we have been inserted collectively into a simulation. That's why I say resistance is futile. You have to exit the matrix. You can't take sides within it. That's what feeds this thing. Your belief, fighting for it. You can go be a protester where you're going to be surrounded by riot cops and you're basically like a mental patient attacking the orderlies. Like you're not going to change anything. Conscious Daughter says Joseph Smith was, 33rd degree. Yeah, I have looked into the Urantia books. I've read channeled books. When I joined the Thelemic cult, they had me read Jane Roberts' Seth Speaks channeled literature. The thing about channeled literature that makes you think it's all fake is that a lot of it's new agey stuff, and it's all built upon the idea of galaxies and deep space, as NASA advertises. And I think what they've done, and I think this is all by design, I think they have tried to mystify space. So New Agers would see Gaia as a planet to be protected, and they could fuse it with environmentalism, which they have in many ways. Okay, I'm continuing through your comments. Oh, by the way, I'm going to be on Fakeologist on Thursday. On Thursday, the 22nd, I'll be on some kind of a panel or something. I'm not sure. We'll see. Well, they gave me a list of books to read, and they told me that the Aeon of Osiris was phased out, and they're bringing in the Aeon of the new sun, Horus. And it was explained to me that prior to the Aeon of Horus, there was a matriarchal system. Then it became patriarchal. But that the new Aeon would be androgynous, partaking of both. That the new God would be a child, I guess symbolically meaning disconnected from tradition and the past, and that all the old religions would be taken apart and replaced by this new world-encompassing religion. Well, what do you think that religion is? Nasatology. And if you read their literature, the Thelemite OTO, this is just Order Templar Orientis. It's all the same stuff. It's the same Hydra, different heads. They describe the new Aeon being the Aeon of Mars. So what does that mean? We're entering the age of Mars, the Aeon of Horus, which they associate with Mars. And you look at Elon Musk and the Mars program and our space odyssey, which is taking us to Mars. Well, what does Mars really represent? What does it mean? It's not about taking you to some distant paradise way the hell out there. It's about changing the way we live here to align with this ideal they represent as being up there. We will live on Earth as we live on Mars. And don't forget, Musk came out of Werner von Braun's memory, out of his mind, his imagination rather, his book, Mars, A Technical Tale, about the Elon, the colonizer of Mars. This is another example of a world stage character. Elon Musk is a real person. He breathes. He reads his lines, though. He's an actor. Do you really think he cares about free speech? No, he's a wrecking ball. Elon Musk is there to set an example for why we can't let individuals get too rich. Look what they do. They pollute cyberspace with mind junk. They pollute low Earth orbit with space junk. And I hear more and more about the Kessler syndrome, which isn't something that was talked about very often I haven't heard it except outside of our conversations, but the idea is this catastrophe could occur if one CubeSat hits another, hits another, hits another. It continues until you have this field up there of debris and junk, and it's unstoppable, and we may never leave the Earth again. That kind of situation is being talked about more and more among people I consider to be influencers, the people who are being fed certain memes. So the memes of space junk, for example. Nobody was talking about space junk. When I first heard the topic talked about on the Joe Rogan show, it was Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he was talking about space junk and what a threat it was. And Joe Rogan was like, "Has anybody ever been hit by that stuff? Has it hit the space?" And he's like, change the subject because they had no examples of it. But now there are plenty of examples. In fact, I was talking about that movie Megaopolis, Francis Ford Coppola, where on the trailer it opens up with a Russian satellite breaking apart and falling down to the earth. As that trailer comes out, guess what happened in space? A Russian satellite, just like the book, blew up into 100 pieces, necessitating all of the ISS astronauts to go into cover. The satellite, 220 miles above the ground, broke apart into 100 shards. A dead Russian satellite creates 100 pieces of space junk. So let me go ahead and bring this up really quick here. Megaopolis. Okay, so Megaopolis just came out, and it has something to do with an aged Russian satellite falling to the Earth. Russian satellite shatters into pieces in space. Oh, we don't have any pictures of the space junk. No videos. Why is that? But what my point here is that they introduce concepts to us through memes, through influencers. They saturate the collective psyche. This is predictive programming. It's not just in the movies. It's coming from the mouths of agents. We hear it all the time. You can kind of read what's going to come. You can kind of get an idea by listening to what they're propagating and how it's popularized. And once they have everybody thinking about it, they provide the visuals, then they make it real. Right now, there's a family suing NASA for mental anguish because space junk hit their house. There's SpaceX junk falling in some place in North Carolina. Some farmer found a bunch of pieces. So it's happening. It exists. The public has accepted another lie. Lean Dion, Billionaire Blimp Club. Foundational liars. Yeah, the Billionaire Blimp Club. Do you remember when Elon Musk tweeted, "Blimps are cool"? Like, he knows. In fact, that's a whole other topic, but, how do they fake rockets going to space? Are these real rockets? Well, there's reason to suspect that they're not really going to space. So where are they going? It's a magic show. Like, where does a rabbit go when it goes into the hat? Like, it's a silly question to say, "Oh, they went into space because I didn't see where it landed." Okay, well then the rabbit went through a portal accessible to the magician's hat. Like, it is a magic show, and there's some speculation that they're using basically rigid airships. And these rigid airships go out of sight, out of mind, and then they change the feed to the, quote, space feed, where you see it going into Star Trek territory, science fiction. We live in the Disney universe, but it's a sleight of mind. They want you to put it together, the continuity. Like, yeah, we saw it go out of sight, and now the cameras are showing us where it is now. Easy magic trick to debunk. Now, I was doing some research into this individual named Konstantin, this early rocket pioneer in Russia, and this is back when they used to talk a lot about space communism and how on Mars you could build the perfect communist civilization and then export it back to Earth. Well, one of the proponents of this was someone named Konstantin, who's been quoted by Elon Musk. This is where you get the idea of mankind becoming multi-planetary, a multi-planetary species. What's interesting about this, there's a few layers to it. One of them is that he was a believer in panpsychism, in Russian cosmism. In other words, he had a very mystical view of space. And that's how space always was. But this individual, Constantine, early rocket pioneer, is considered the father of space flight. He conceived the space elevator. So again, this is Constantine with his steered dirigibles. Now, here's what I find most interesting about him, because I think this individual here is kind of Musk-like. One of the things he was involved in were these steel dirigibles, lighter than air powered flying machines. So he proposed the idea of these all metal dirigibles, these metal blimps. He called them controllable metallic balloons, 1892. He gave a technical rationale for the design of airships with a metal sheath. Now, what's interesting about this is that he wasn't supported in this. It never took off. Like, that's interesting, because maybe they did take off. Maybe this is how they've been faking spaceflight the entire time. Maybe those so-called rockets are really just blimps, remote controlled. And they land them somewhere, and nobody knows that they didn't go up into space. They're looking up. These things are out of sight, out of mind. That's just one hypothesis. I mean, it could all just be CGI at this point. Okay, moving on. Checking up on your comments. Leo Pirate says, crystallizing hoaxes with predictive, concurrent, and reinforcing programming. Yeah, and it's like Mandela affecting people. It is the misinformation effect. So the misinformation effect is something I researched when I was looking into the Mandela effect's various explanations. And I was referencing how the Mandela effect is the result of retroactive interference. Well, the misinformation effect occurs when a person's recall becomes less accurate because of post-event information. So we're talking about retroactive interference when information presented later interferes with the ability to retain the previously encoded information. Goes on to say, individuals have been shown to be susceptible to incorporating misleading information into their memory when it is presented within a question. The new information works backward in time to distort the memory of the original event. So the misinformation effect is caused by what now? A question. What kind of question? A loaded question. And this is a reference to an article about eyewitness testimony and how eyewitness testimony is often distorted, which results in wrongful convictions. So it's a real problem. Look up the Innocence Project. Eyewitness testimony is not perfect, and the Mandoozled think that their eyewitness testimony is perfect. Oh, there's no way I'm wrong about this. My memory. But my memory. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. And I concluded that the Mandela effect is caused by the question that's loaded, that causes them to conflate a prompted imagining with the prompted recollection. And it turns out that the misinformation effect describes the same phenomenon. So if you're Mandela affected, you're misinformation affected. And the person who asked you, hey, which do you remember, A or B, was actually screwing up your mind, just scrambling your brains a little bit. But there's still hope. Mind War inoculation is free here at Infinite Plane Radio. Go to ips.monster and you can find all the various platforms where you can listen live and check the archives. Elephant Tusk says, the gods rule over mankind from afar, and their incarnations give their order to the ruling houses of humanity which carry out their agendas. What if the gods are a construct, and behind that construct are men, and that men are ruling over men? People ruling over people. I refuse to accept the premise without evidence that there's a point where the demiurge, a higher power, gods are somehow involved in the nightly news, because it has a clear agenda which is pro-state, liberal, Democrat, leftist. Its agenda is too biased for it to be specifically like or in any way attributable to a god. Like, yeah, God's trying to get you guys to give up your guns. God wants you to believe in global warming so you can pay taxes to these liars so they can rob you for the rest of your lives and your children's lives and make you feel bad about your consumer purchases. No, I don't think a higher power would be doing that. Let's leave God out of it. It's like assuming that there's a divine authorship to the news media. No, I don't accept that the news media is divinely authored. And the believers in predictive programming as synchromysticism have assumed something, quote, higher is doing it. And I assure you it's not. Super interesting comments in the chat here. A lot of people are talking about Mormonism. Fascinating subject. Okay, moving on here. So we talked about the Mandela effect. In fact, the retroactive interference is described here in this little flow chart. You have your memory, then you have a new memory. It's actually quite easy to create these things. I think I reverse engineered it enough. So the Mandela effect is real, but it's not reality shifting. Now, again, I'm very interested to see if there are any people who are deep into it who have the courage to say, hey, I was wrong. I have stepped out of this paradigm and I'm back to objective reality. Not very often. Believers are qualitatively different than knowers. Believers are not seekers. If anything, they seek the comfort of not having to think and know, but the numbers they get, the flock of sheep around them, make them feel more secure. I'm also interested to see if people who fell for certain psyops, like chemtrails being dissolved by boiling vinegar, I'd like to see if any of them can come out and say, okay, I was wrong. Like, I was wrong. When is the last time you heard a truther say, I was wrong? Whistleblower says, Bill Gates is seeding monkeypox via chemtrails. And they have a video to prove it. The video here is a often recycled one, and these individuals are shameless. They get community notes and they don't care. And they don't admit that they're satire. Bill Gates is sending moneypox. What kind of people believe this stuff? I would be worried about placebo effects. You believe it enough, you stress about it enough. All these people who are worried about the sky falling, always crying wolf, yeah, that affects you. The stress affects you. Thrustazar says there are no former. Yeah, there aren't any. Have you ever met anyone who was full-blown Q who stepped out of it? Actually, there are plenty of people who entertained the idea and hoped it was true. I mean, who didn't hope it was true at the very beginning? It was like like I wasn't. I said I don't trust anonymous sources, but people are led to believe, oh, it's terrible. The Clintons are eating babies, but Q's going to save us. So they sell you on a very negative story, and then they sell you on the solution. I had some Q nutter say to me, don't you want to save the children? It's like asking Kramer, don't you want to wear the AIDS ribbon? You're not against AIDS? Well, I'm against baby eaters, but I'm not going to wear a Q ribbon because I don't think their claims match up to reality. But I had someone literally say that. Oh, I guess you don't want to save the children. Like, you're not saving any kids. You're tweeting. That's all you're doing. You're doom scrolling and you're tweeting. So what happens is they're sold this dark version of the world that doesn't exist, and they're told, you're the cure. You're the solution. Well, the problem's not even real. Trust the infinite plane. Don't trust the plan. What is it called? Operation Trust. Ryler05 says, I wanted Nisera Jasara to be real. Yeah, it's a good concept to sell people on. Like, if you go with us, all your bills will be forgiven. All your debts will be forgiven. According to the right, Nisera Gasara. But the left believes in the Great Reset and universal basic income. So take your pick. I'll take a universal basic income or a Nisara Gasara, either one. I'll take another stimmy check. If you want to give us stimmy checks because Bill Gates is dumping moneypox, sure. What they're doing is they're buying your complicity. They're paying you to be a crisis actor. I kind of resented it. I was like, okay, I'll take the money, but I'm not going to act. And what did I do? I got in my car and I drove to Corona Field in Roswell, where the UFO ended. That's what I did during lockdowns. I didn't see any other cars on the road. Leo Pirate says, I think the success of Trumpianity is predicted on not having to do with anything but support a reality TV show host. Yes, it's a matter of conditioning. I mean, when I first saw Trump, I think it was around the time of the Tea Party, he was pushing the idea that Trump was, none of that Obama was Kenyan. So he stepped into the Tea Party, which seemed to mostly be about fiscal conservatism, and then he threw in the conspiracy stuff. Later, it got attached to alt-right, to the manosphere, and to this culture war stuff, and now it's become the MAGA ban. We've witnessed the evolution of this thing. Trump effectively killed conservatism. There are no sane voices on the right. I mean, if you find one, let me know. But they're all operating through the filter of the PSYOP entertainment complex. You're not going to find a politician or a popular influencer who doesn't believe all the fake news. Nobody was happier about the stack of severed baby heads on 10/7 than Ben Shapiro. In fact, we were working on an animation where he was throwing them against the wailing wall, just splat, 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 throwing baby heads. Symbia had actually made a lot of the heads out of people we know, and I almost want to go finish that animation. It's like these pundits are so thirsty. They don't care if it's blood or outrage, whatever it is. It's all about the clicks. Okay, Bach Precision says, yeah, the fake, the birthers. The birthers, that was funny. I mean, yeah, anyway, we'll move on. That's just the advent of Trumpism, and it's evolved over time. The Q thing, though, is understated. Like, people act like it's separate from Trump or he's not the head of it. Trump is the head of the Q snake. He is. We have evidence. Okay, continuing, going through my Minds.com feed. I got into this conversation with someone over the fake moon landing. And he said, sure, buddy, everything is fake and only you know the truth. And my answer to this was, because this is ridicule, appeal to ridicule, an informal logical fallacy. Because I find their end to be ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous if you believe in moon landings. I think it's ridiculous if you vote for somebody who believes in moon landings. I think it's a kooky belief. It's NASAtology is kookier and scammier than Scientology. But he said again, sure, buddy, this is Don Carlin, everything is fake and only you know the truth, laughing emoji. And I said to him, there are many more people every day figuring out how much fakery is involved in what people think is news. What's more laughable to me is that you believe consensus lies and you defend them with emojis. And just saying, if you're throwing laughing emojis when you're not making a point, it makes you look insecure. And unless you're really laughing, it's disingenuous. Like if you're not laughing to tears, you're just basically like that angry NPC meme. Let me see if I can find it, where he's crying, but then he's hiding behind a mask where he's smiling. Like that's pretty much you. This is the one. So this moon landing believer, this Mooney, is like, sure, everything's fake and you know the truth. And he's throwing a laughing emoji. This is him. His eyes are bloodshot from crying. He's rage crying. He's triggered, but he's pretending he's not. He's hiding behind emojis. Doesn't fool me for 1 second. I see through your emojis. Armed and underground inside the turbulent secret world of an American militia. This is an interesting article by ProRepublica about the American Patriots 3% group. So I'm thinking the coming PSYOP is going to be somehow connected to the body of symbolism that we've been noting. And they call this one AP, American Patriots. So AP is a easy to discern 116. And remember, Patriot Front was introduced to the world on a 6/11. Nobody knew Patriot Front was. And then on 6/11/22, they jumped out of the back of a, here it is, June 11th, 2022, Patriot Front jump out of a U-Haul. And there were like 33 of them inside of a U-Haul. They were probably all cops, obviously. But the 6/11, again, that's 6/11, always connected to the far right. One of their founders, or their founder's name is Rousseau, which has some French Revolution connections. Again, Trump gets shot at 6/11. Armed and underground inside the secret world of an American militia. I'll put a link to the article. It's 42 minutes long. If you listen to the audio, I listened to it going to bed. It's actually pretty good. And what I picked up out of it here is that the stage has been set for right-wing terror to be the new radical Islamic terror. That's why I say MAGA ban. MAGA ban is a thing. It's totally, obviously, led by provocateurs. I mean, who was the guy who founded the Oath Keepers? Look, J6, maybe you want to join. Okay, J6, 16, January 6. 16 is a huge code here as well. Waco was raided over 1.6 million bullets. 1.6. Look at this here. When someone refers to the incident in Waco, they accumulated 1.6 million rounds of ammunition. And then, when Alex Jones went on Piers Morgan, and he said 1776 will commence if you try to take the guns, that was in response to the DHS purchasing 1.6 billion hollow point rounds. Here you go. The Department of Homeland Security has an open purchase order for 1.6 billion rounds of ammunition. So that's what Alex Jones was talking about when he went on Piers Morgan. And he had his little freak out moment. He said 1776 will commence again. So you got 1.6 million, 1.6 million, 1.6 billion. You have January 6th. Further, it's connected here because Waco was rebuilt in part. The Branch Davidian Church was rebuilt by Alex Jones. He was radicalized at Waco. And so was Timothy McVeigh. Waco is where Trump kicked off his latest campaign. He called it the final battle. And of course, Dave Koresh was 33. His followers believed he was Jesus. He was incinerated, burned, 419, for which Timothy McVeigh struck back and hit the Oklahoma City building, bombed it, and that was again on 419. So when Trump's on trial on 419 and Maxwell Azrello sets himself on fire, yeah, that's a code. The 419, the Burning Man. It's obviously a reference to all of these things. They're all aligned. Lean Dion says, what's a groiper? A groiper is the group of alt-right or far-right conspiracy theorists who originated on 4chan, and they are the ones who are largely sharing the frog memes. Now, groiper sounds really close, uncomfortably, especially since Ollie Alexander, Kevin Spacey, Owen Schroyer. It's admitted, Ollie Alexander, Kevin Spacey, Ollie Alexander. I mean, Owen Schroyer. Owen Schroyer is the host of Alex Jones' InfoWars, and apparently Ollie Alexander groipered him. And he wasn't having it. He almost beat him up over it. I wouldn't want to be groipered by anybody. The groipers are now led by Nick Fuentes, who's preparing some kind of a groiper war insurrection against MAGA in Michigan. So you have all these fringe characters attacking each other. Candace Owen is being attacked by Milo. What's his name? Mossad Milo Yiannopoulos from Breitbart. They're all attacking each other. It's like a circular firing squad on the far right. And I wonder, are they tearing it down? It seems like they're tearing down a lot of the internet personalities who blew up around the first wave of Trumpism, 2015, 2016. Elephant Tusk says, ever hear of David Koresh's music? No, no, I'd like to hear some. I've heard some of Manson's music, Charles Manson, and John Hinckley was on tour. John Hinckley actually tours right now. And after Trump was shot at, they actually contact John Hinckley. Like, what's your message for people? It's like you're talking to the guy who shot some president and asking him what he thinks about it. Like, why is he a subject matter expert? But yeah, he's on tour right now. John Hinckley would be Reagan assassin to play in Connecticut. That was back in March. John Hinckley Jr., the folk musician and would-be assassin of Ronald Reagan, will make a second attempt to play in Connecticut. He says the booking is all about redemption. Okay. Again, John Hinckley was inspired by Robert De Niro to shoot the president. You know this guy's an actor. Has to be. Plus, he had the Bush connections. But again, consider this. He's inspired by Travis Bickle, Robert De Niro's portrayal of Travis Bickle, dresses like him. And just like Travis Bickle saves Jodie Foster, this guy was writing letters to Jodie Foster because he was going to impress her by doing the shooting. So he was living out Taxi Driver. And then, of course, Robert De Niro is the assassin. Fast forward, Robert De Niro gets killed in the Joker movie, which is based on Taxi Driver in large part. And, of course, Joker shoots him, so it's the full circle completed. Now I'm going to watch King of Comedy, Robert De Niro, Scorsese, who also directed Taxi Driver, because there may be a deeper level of connection here with Robert De Niro representing Trump and this assassination story. I mean, it's really fascinating what they've done with these Trump deranged characters. Alec Baldwin, a twin of Trump, Robert De Niro, a twin of Trump, and then their world stage actions correlating with what is happening with Trump. Like Robert De Niro, we talked about plenty, and his recent jumping off the yacht and getting kicked off Twitter. Interesting connections that we were talking about the other day. But back to Alec Baldwin, he gets his charges dropped for shooting somebody. And then, of course, he plays Trump on SNL. So at the same time, that was on July 13th. On July 15th, Trump has his 34 charges dropped. So both versions of Trump, the real version and the world stage persona portrayed by Baldwin, are both set free. And both of them have this connection. Trump had said famously that he could go out on the Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and not lose any voters. This statement about impunity. And it's kind of interesting, the parallel here, if you ask me, that Alec Baldwin quite literally got away with that. Like, got away with murder, is what we're saying. And then Trump gets away with his 34 accounts, his 34 felonies. So we've been looking at these parallels very closely. Another interesting parallel, and I didn't catch this one until someone told me yesterday, that the clown Trump in the Snoop Dogg video where he's getting shot is portrayed by Michael Rappaport, that cringy comedian. Leo Pirate says, the amount of predictive programming behind Trump for me at least makes me think he'll be the next president. Yeah, I based it on predictive programming. I was looking at Fallout, where the Trump character has the blood on the side of its head, this little Trump figurine. And in the same picture, you have Betty Pearson, who's the one who hijacks, through election theft, control of Vault 33. So it looks to me like Trump gets his head wound, and then Kamala takes over. We have the Civil War movie, where the Trump character gets killed by the black female soldier, and they specifically wanted that. They said, no, she gets to shoot him. It's like they were drawing straws or fighting over who's going to be the one to do the deed, and they chose that. So if I had to base it on predictive programming, it looks to me like she has a greater role here than he does in the future, which means the death of Q. And I'm seeing all these alt-right influencers like Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens all just kind of burning out right now. And I'm wondering, this seems like some controlled demo. Isabel Ann says, are you still live there? Yes, we are. Civil War was painfully uninteresting. I fell asleep 20 minutes into it, says Dwayne Abith. I went to the theater to watch it, and whenever I watch these movies, I go into the composition notebook, and it's usually dark in the theater, so I don't see what I'm writing. So what I'll do is I'll write a few notes on a page, not taking my eyes off the screen, and just turn the page, and I'll have all my notes easy to isolate the different points that I picked up during the film, and I don't miss anything in this way. I watched the Civil War movie, and I maybe only took 5 notes. Usually I fill up a notebook. There was nothing there, bereft of anything other than what you saw in the trailer, just kind of extended. I was like, okay, certain archetypes, this is MAGA, that's Trump. It was a commercial. I mean, it was a trailer. It wasn't even a movie. Leo says, I think it's a controlled demo of the extremists who have a criticism of Trump. Well, they're all compromised from Ollie Alexander on down. The infrastructure is set to burn. There's Milo dangling the prospects of releasing pictures of Nick Fuentes that will destroy him. So it's getting really close. And after that, see, this Groyper War thing didn't start until Milo started teasing out the idea that he's going to reveal some stuff about Nick Fuentes that will destroy him in the eyes of his followers. So it's getting really close. And as he makes this announcement, Fuentes doesn't acknowledge it, but now he starts getting very warlike. So it almost seems desperate. A good point, Lean Dion. One of the big themes about Civil War was it's from the perspective of journalists. And then it showed how the normies could choose not to care about the news. So they don't even notice there's a war going on. The journalists do. So it shows journalists as martyrs. They're getting PTSD. They're on the front lines in the war, and we're just blissfully unaware, and we're deeply unappreciative of the journalists. So it did show a few things. In fact, it made some statements that I thought were kind of ironic about how if you're not interested in the war, you can just pretend it's not happening because it's like another reality through the TV. It kind of makes the point that I've been making that nobody reality tests the claims of the media, and we're totally susceptible to whatever they say because, of course, we've accepted the authority of the screen as a society. So the movie kind of presents the media itself as a bunch of martyrs, and then it shows the right-wing types as anti-media. Oh, you work for Reuters? Boom. So it did kind of paint up the MAGA as anti-media, as racist also, because one guy's from China, so he gets shot. So that's kind of what we saw. Caricatures, straw men, everything you would expect. But the media as heroes, that's laughable. Kind of a joke. But if you replace the idea that they're frontline reporting on stuff that nobody wants to see, out of sight, out of mind, with the idea that they are producing psyops through simulated mass casualty events turned into propaganda pieces, then it all makes sense. The movie could show how they're faking war, how they could fake a civil war. They will lock you down. They'll say, oh, there's a civil war happening. There's dirty bombs and drones dropping dirty bombs that are going to cause some kind of fallout, so you can't leave your house, and you don't have a Geiger counter, so you can't test it, and the government has to test it, so you're staying home. So if everybody's locked down, they can have skirmishes. They can have a militia fight the ATF somewhere, and nobody will doubt that it's happening. That's all it's going to take. Imagine 15 or 20 such events in isolation, out of sight, out of mind. It will merge seamlessly. They will give us a civil war. And the Leave the World Behind movie leaves it open that Kevin Bacon represents the white nationalists and that they're the ones behind the shutting down of the infrastructure through targeted bombings of power plants, etc. But Leave the World Behind is an anagram for Behold the End War Live. And the Donnie Darko-esque character Rose at the very end is in a bunker watching TV as the nukes go off above. So you behold the end war live, if you ask me, is about how you will leave the world behind. When there's a war, you will go into your basement. You will go into your living room, rather, and you will watch Netflix. You will watch the news, and you will behold the end war live on TV. Thank you very much. Appreciate the super chat, Thirst for Truth. All super chats will be going to fund Auto Hoax Con number 1, which again is on 9/28/2024. Depending on how well it goes, Auto Hoax Con 2 will take place before 2025 for sure. Sooner the better. Best case scenario, we sell enough tickets and books and copies of the IPS Insider to fund a follow-up. And each of these Auto Hoax Cons will focus on different aspects of the PSYOP entertainment complex. I have an outline for how it's going to go. I'll provide more details as we get closer to the date, but we're organizing it behind the scenes. I'm going to get big poster printouts of all the various Auto Hoaxology charts and illustrations I have done, like the one that shows the MSM box, MSM plus, MSM minus, where the programmers are. I have a number of diagrams that show the political horseshoe, the model that we live in, the model that we have opted out of. I have diagrams, I have flowcharts, I have a number of things that I'm printing out big to really explain what we're talking about here to the noobs, to a layperson. So I say my objective here is not to wake up blue pillars. I'm not trying to evangelize. However, we are codifying a philosophy, applied skepticism toward media, and this is ground zero. So this Auto Hoax Con will be an opportunity to make the distinction between what we do and what conspiracy theorists do. Because this is not a conspiracy theorist conference. If anything, we're devoting this first one to making that distinction even clearer. It's very important that we break away from that. And here's why. Mainstream and alt media are both non-skeptical. They're both non-skeptical media. They're selectively skeptical, you could say, but they don't have skepticism about media itself, just about the stories that the other side tells. And so if we say, well, we don't want to keep this too small, so let's invite some of the truthers, not the QAnoners, just the ones who are scared of 5G towers. No, we will be outnumbered. And if you can be made to be afraid of 5G towers, you can be made afraid of anything. And we're trying to break away from that. Entropy 33 says, you should look at the roster of graduates from the Naval Postgraduate School in California. Many astronauts have graduated there and definitely learned to spacewalk underwater with the Navy. Yep, the Neutral Buoyancy Lab. They're basically movie stars. You look at these astronauts and like, well, they're pilots, sure they've accomplished, many of them are individuals of very high accomplishment, very educated, very intelligent people. Look, I'm not putting down astronauts. However, they're not really going to space. There's a point where they're acting. There's a point where, I mean, like, I'm not anti-science. Like the caller, John the Plumber, talked about Mr. Wizard and these science shows. Science is not the problem here. The problem is lies. Lies conflated with science. Real merged with fake. Our Manduzled reality. But science gets you out of this. What they want truthers to do is to reject science and to embrace religion, which is regressive. If anything, the methodology of science is something we should be embracing to the extent that it's based on skepticism. And if you're not skeptical of media, then anything that you obtain through media and accept as science likely could be enhanced with special effects. Like science isn't something you believe. I believe the science. Well, then you don't know what science is. Observing Reality says, the diagrams you have made sound great. Diagrams. Yeah, let me show you a couple of them here. I have to purchase the full version of Canva again. So maybe I can find some on my blog. So at timosmond.blog, there's a section called Auto Hoaxology 101. And if you scroll through there, you'll find some of these diagrams I speak of. So this is a pretty good one. I'll bring out this one. I'll go through and I'll pull some of these articles out from behind the paywall, and you'll see the value of these, especially. And the first one, shout out to Mick Media. Mick Media interviewed me, and they put up this chart, this graphic they made, and I've used it on this ebook called Auto Hoaxology 101: The False Flag Fallacy. And they contrasted the auto hoaxer, and they put an eye in a pyramid, with auto believer. And there's a person inside of a television set. And they described accurately that, from our perspective, the masses are auto believers because they automatically believe. And if something's fake, they'll assume it's going to be told to them later, but generally just trust if it's on the screen. And the auto hoaxer says everything should be considered fake until proven real. So this really made it pretty obvious what we're talking about here. It's about, do you accept the authority of the screen? Are you inside the box, or do you think for yourself? Are you the arbiter of what you believe? So the eye in the pyramid here symbolizes your I, yourself. Are you the ruler over your own mind, or have you outsourced it? Okay, the next one. This is a poster. I'm going to have these posters made available for attendees, but I'm going to also use these to focus the lecture and the conversations, and get people to see what we're saying here. So this one is called "How Free Is Your Mind from the MSM Cult's Influence? The level of control mass media exerts over your worldview depends upon your basic assumptions about its claims. Which do you prefer? Comforting lies, frightening possibilities, or just the truth?" So MSM refers to average news consumer mainstream mediation. Media is their window to the world. They are believers. It's real plus fake, a lie augmented worldview. They believe they know what's going on. They believe in comforting lies. Next one is MSM plus, truthers. The media is hiding something. There's more to the picture. They too are believers, but to understand their point of view, it's real plus fake plus additional narratives, which the MSM dismisses as, quote, conspiracy. So MSM plus is the mainstream and then some. So they have the lie augmented worldview. They know they don't know what's going on, but they believe in frightening possibilities. The third one, MSM minus, off-world stage observers, auto hoaxers, fakeologists, skeptics. The media is a filter. Its claims require facts and evidence. These are knowers. So the formula here is real minus fake. The world as it is. These would be the Psy-War aware, and they know the source of the deceptions. So they are non-believers, but rather knowers. And here's another one that has the political horseshoe, and this explains the guardrails. This explains controlled opposition. So you have this model of the world that all exists within a horseshoe. And I'm using the political horseshoe theory, which I contend is an actual model here. So on the left you have, well, first of all, in the middle it says world stage, blue pill, dreamers. This is where everybody that you know is. But where the truthers are, and those on the outside, those who don't accept the world stage, if they lean right, they go red pill, nightmare version of the blue pill. If you lean left, you go wokeism. And in the right and left, you have their mirror image attitudes and beliefs. On the left, you got critical race theory. On the right, you have critical Jew theory. On the left, you have climate change. On the right, you have geoengineering phobia. So the left is gatekept, and the right is gatekept, but they each have their own misinterpretation of what the blue pill consumers accept. Individuals that awaken from the dream are routed back into a world stage centric perspective. So here's what the horseshoe means. The horseshoe means that at the far fringe left, far fringe right, they begin to resemble each other, but they don't quite meet. So it's not a full circle. It's like a horseshoe. It doesn't meet all the way. And when you're going into the conspiracy realm, or going into Woketown, you're questioning the mainstream. But instead of going off the stage, you get routed back in. You get routed to the fringe, in fact. Like if you think all the news is lying, what are you going to go into? Well, let's say you go into Trutherville, you go into Q-Town. Eventually, you believe the most extreme, extraordinary, non-substantiated stuff that you could possibly conceive of. People who believe in the deep state, the JFK nonsense, this stuff is just fringe. But you could look at Patriot Front and Proud Boys as a mirror of Antifa, as a mirror of BLM. So the fringes do resemble each other, and they're both puppeteered by the same side. But anyway, the horseshoe is part of the steering mechanism that keeps everybody on the same sheet. I have a lot of other, in fact, one of the newer ones is on the IPS Insider Twitter account, if you join the community there. Let me bring this one up. So the Twitter account where it's live is IPS Think Tank, and the other one is IPS Insider, and that's the one I use when I'm engaging in polemics, when I'm fighting Mandela affected. Okay, so the article here, what is the parallel media? You can read that if you feel like it. I'll put that likely in the first edition of the IPS Insider. But I have a graphic here that shows the MSM box, MSM Plus, where the programmers would be relative to the programmed. We'll do all this stuff, though, in detail. I'll go over all these things as part of the Auto Hoax Con. The visual aids will definitely help, though. Because what we're trying to do here is demonstrate that there is a model, that the map is not the territory. And that's where everyone gets it wrong. They see the map as the territory. The model is the world. And it's like, no, it's not like that at all. That is an interpretation. Okay, it's been great. Appreciate all the comments and callers. I think I've got to most of the notes. I want to make sure we haven't missed anything. We're waiting for the next major plot twist. Politico has this headline, Trump's nuclear explosion. We are waiting for that. It should follow. Oh, here's an interesting coincidence. And this is just a coincidence. I'm going to play this clip. This is from the Howard Stern Show. And here you have Seth MacFarlane.
The most amazing thing I read about you, the idea that on 9/11 you were late for your plane. You were supposed to be on one of the planes that went down.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I was giving a lecture at my old college in Rhode Island, and was went out for a few drinks afterwards. Was hungover the next day,
Right.
and missed the flight. I got to the counter and they said, I'm sorry, they just closed the gate. You're too late.
Wow.
And went to sleep in the lounge and woke up 40 minutes later, and the flight had.
So he's a 9/11 survivor. Just happened to miss the flight, just like that Final Destination. That just tells you something. There's so many of these individuals. Crisis actors exist at various levels. You have the false witnesses, you have the liars on the ground with their scripts, and then you have the people in Hollywood. And I think that this is a status symbol. That if you're in Hollywood and you're given a crisis acting gig, you're given a gig on the world stage. Now you're involved in a deeper level. And I think that these are people who would likely be deeper in the know. In fact, he's got this show called The Orwell. Is that the one? Yeah. The Orville. A science fiction series. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it myself, but I've heard a lot about it. And there is this episode that I think explains where the power elite want us to go with this idea of spaceship Earth. And there's this episode where he's describing how you had this group of people inside of a hollowed out meteor going across space. And after a few generations, because it's totally sustainable, they recycle everything. Nothing gets wasted. And they're going out through space, and at some point they forget that they're going somewhere. And they forget there's a world outside of it because it's such a perfect enclosed system. So they describe this thing as like a good thing. Like this is what we should strive for, that we should create this perfect closed system. And the closed system idea is integral to the environmentalist movement and showing us the face of Gaia, showing us the earth. Oh, it's a closed system, everything's finite. We have to aim for sustainability, consume less. The entire ethos of getting people into lockdown culture for the sake of saving the planet, it's all intrinsically tied to this idea of spaceship Earth and limitation and finitude and time and space. We're in the end times now because climate change. That's science. That's what they tell you. But it's an ideal they want you to accept, that this is what we should strive for. Living in an arc, bunker life, reducing, shrinking the scale and scope of your existence. Because there's no room for you. There's too many of you, etc. We're running out of time. I mean, it's all just control. Okay, I have something else here. This is Michael Hoffman, who wrote Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare. Excellent writer. I like his work. However, he is an auto-believer. I don't hold it against him, but he lives in a nightmare world where everything is real. But he's the one who coined the term revelation of the method. Whenever you hear somebody say revelation of the method explains predictive programming, it came from him. And I don't hold it against him. I mean, he came from a different place, different era. But listen to this. Who then is modern man? He is a mind-bombed patsy who gets his marching orders from the twilight language, key words sprinkled throughout his news and current events. He dances to the tune of the elite managers of human behavior. He scoffs with great derision at the idea of the existence and operation of a technology of mass mind control emanating from media and government. Modern man is much too smart to believe anything as superstitious as that. Modern man is the ideal hypnotic subject, puffed up on the idea that he is the crown of creation. He vehemently denies the power of the hypnotist's control over him, even as his head bobs up and down on a string. It's Michael Hoffman. And I think he nails it there, that people are too arrogant to recognize the existence of a world-spanning mind control operation. And I say, to make it simple, there's only government. There's not governments. There's no competition. There's the programming class, and government is exercised through media, through the universities, through the entertainment, through the academia. It's all combined. I call it the game program. Government, academia, media, entertainment. But it's all unified at the very top. But you wouldn't know it because the programmers themselves are programmed, and it is stratified and compartmentalized. You can't see the big picture unless you go to space, and you get the overview effect. That's what they call it. You go to space, you go further enough away from the Earth, you could see the entire Earth with space around it, and now you have the big picture. They call that the overview effect. Well, what I call the off-world stage perspective is what happens when you recognize that the model of the world we've given is a model, because you can see it now. We have the overview effect, and unlike the ones that the astronauts get, ours is real. And if you don't have the overview effect, if you don't see the model as a model and you're still in it, your head's in the box, you're an auto-believing fool. And no offense, I mean, that's the default. Anyway, thank you all for joining. Appreciate the callers and comments. I'll send out archives. This is Chief Crow, Cult. It's actually Ball Earth Cult, which it is.
Ranch dressing, goat heads with the number 9. It is so divine with the holy grail, shape of the snail, the Fibonacci sound of the conch. Third eye rainbow swastika in my pine cone like a dirt bike goes. Third eye rainbow swastika in my pine cone like a dirt bike goes. Third eye rainbow swastika in my pine cone like a dirt bike goes. And cream, you make that dough, the symbol show. Euthanasia, blue wrench with the water world. Nightmare hippie girl, flippy Illuminati, got the VIP cause I'm a 33.